notorious regime emerges from the rubble of years of fighting in Afghanistan. Meet the men who helped create the Taliban.
I will tell you why I was joined with the Taliban.
Afghan survivors explain how these Islamic holy warriors first brought hope, then only repression and fear.
Their ideas were wrong, their mission was wrong, their mentality was wrong.
Former spies reveal how the United States helped drive the extremists from power after 9/11. But now the Taliban are back, deadlier than ever.
They think they can destroy Taliban. How can they destroy Taliban? You have to destroy the entire nation.
Spanning almost 30 years, the epic story behind the Taliban is a tale of three men. A one-eyed religious mystic, a legendary military strategist, and the most famous terrorist alive. The rise, the fall, and the rebirth of the Taliban. Soviet leaders are seized by Cold War paranoia. The Kremlin fears that the United States could use Afghanistan to threaten the Soviet mainland, according to this former CIA officer.
They had a gross misreading of our intentions and thought that we were going to move into Afghanistan and even place medium-range missiles. KGB reporting was grotesquely off target.
But Soviet Prime Minister Leonid Brezhnev decides that the communists can't afford to lose Afghanistan. In mid-December 1979, Soviet troops start to mobilize for a major operation. Early on Christmas morning, the first Soviet tanks roll across the border of Afghanistan. This imposing terrain has humbled some of history's greatest armies. But the Soviet Union arrives here with all the arrogance befitting a 20th century nuclear-armed superpower. Only a small rebel militia opposes them, a band of simple men like Mullah Muhammad Omar, armed with little more than their Islamic faith. CIA officers like Michael Scheuer assess this mismatch and make a cold judgment. Afghanistan will end up as a Soviet satellite.
I think initially there was very few people in the American government who didn't believe that the Russians would ultimately prevail, because they had modern guns, because there were so many of them, and because they were brutal.
Within months, the Soviets occupy most of the major cities. But getting into Afghanistan has always been the easy part. It's holding on to the country that has proven historically difficult. For centuries, the Afghan people have resisted occupying forces, from the Greek armies of Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan's Mongols and the imperialist British Empire.
One of the earliest names for Afghanistan is Yagistan. It's called the land of the unruly.
The Afghans are not people you can control or order to do anything.
They do have a strong warrior culture. They do have a strong warrior history.
3 years into the Soviet occupation, the Red Army still can't completely stamp out the resistance. Now, U.S. intelligence officers start to reconsider their opinion of the Afghan Mujahideen.
We began to appreciate the qualities of the Afghans, their ability to absorb punishment, the strength of their faith, their ingenuity in designing ways to kill the Russians. If we armed these people, they would continue to fight the Russians forever.
The war in Afghanistan has the potential to weaken the Soviet Union both militarily and economically. The CIA looks at the Afghans' fierce Islamic passion and sees a dagger that only needs sharpening. Then, the Mujahideen can make the Soviets bleed. New U.S. President Ronald Reagan decides to intensify a covert CIA program, first begun under Jimmy Carter. America will secretly support the Afghan rebels.
The Congress was virtually united in giving whatever aid they could to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, partly because of the feeling that the Russians were a Goliath kicking in the head of a David, but also because a lot of them wanted revenge for what happened in Vietnam.
In Vietnam, Moscow supported America's adversary, the North Vietnamese. Now the CIA hopes to give the Soviets a long drawn-out guerrilla conflict of its own, but they'll have to do it quietly. An overt confrontation could trigger World War III. To disguise U.S. involvement, the secret program requires the cooperation of several Islamic countries sympathetic to the Afghan Jihad, or Holy War. Saudi Arabia agrees to help put up the money, and Pakistan accepts the job of getting the cash and guns into the hands of the Afghans. Pakistani General Hamid Gul will be the gatekeeper through which U.S. arms and money must pass on their way into Afghanistan. Today, Gul is a militant Islamist who has publicly called for Muslims to attack American troops wherever they are deployed. But during the 1980s, he was eager to help the United States fight the Soviets.
The Red Menace had to be defeated. It was a daunting task. Pakistan took up the challenge.
Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, or ISI, will transfer ever-increasing amounts of American money and sophisticated weaponry over the legendary Khyber Pass and into the hands of the Mujahideen. U.S. spending on the CIA's Afghan program grows from $30 million in 1981 to $200 million by 1984, with Saudi Arabia matching every dollar. Soon, the Afghan resistance is doing better than CIA officers ever thought possible. Mujahideen warriors have killed or wounded an estimated 17,000 Soviet soldiers. Victor Munayan was a Red Army medic who saw many of his fellow soldiers return from the battlefield in body bags.
Some were captured. We would recover pieces of soldiers. Only with the pieces could we identify who it was.
The ferocity of the Afghan resistance now forces the Soviets to consider quadrupling their troop deployment. But the Afghans are getting reinforcements too. Thousands of Islamic volunteers from all over the world are arriving in Pakistan to join the jihad. Among the volunteers is a wealthy young Saudi named Osama bin Laden. It's the height of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union wages a brutal campaign in Afghanistan. Between 1980 and 1981, a newcomer from Saudi Arabia arrives to join the rebels trying to oust the Soviets, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden brings money and an expertise in construction, according to two men who worked alongside the future Al-Qaeda leader.
He started building mountainside caves for storage of ammunition, started building roads. And then he was very generous with money. He was popular among all Mujahideen.
When he was with us, helping the poor, widows, orphans, organizing funds for some needy peoples, we had no problem with him at all.
At the time, little about bin Laden suggests the terrorist leader he will become. During the Afghan-Soviet War, the CIA was aware of him, but had no reason to view bin Laden as a threat, says former spy Michael Scheuer.
The first time we heard about Osama bin Laden, he was involved first in refugee care in the camps in Pakistan, and then we heard that he moved into Afghanistan and began to have a unit of Arabs that he commanded. But he was on the side of the angels then. He was killing Russians, and so we didn't pay much attention to him.
Today, U.S. intelligence officers deny they had any direct contact with bin Laden. They say that U.S. aid went only to the Afghans, not to foreign Islamic volunteers.
There are those in the media who just love to make the point that the CIA trained the Afghan Arabs and bin Laden.
It's a popular theory, but it's not one that has much traction.
People like bin Laden came with their own money, a built-in hatred for America, and access to weaponry either from their own sources or from the Pakistanis. They wanted nothing to do with us.
Pakistani journalist Rahimullah Yousafzai is one of the few reporters to interview bin Laden more than once. He says that foreign Arab fighters like bin Laden had little use for the CIA.
There was so much of Arab money coming here that they didn't need to get money from the CIA or ISI.
Charitable contributions from Saudi Arabia are rich enough to support not only the Mujahideen, but also the many Afghan civilians made refugees by the ongoing fighting. Over 4 million Afghans are forced to flee their homes for Pakistan.
1/3 of the population was made homeless for a very long period of time.
Here, along the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, money from Saudi Arabia sets up hundreds of Islamic schools or madrasas to offer a free education for the Afghan refugee children. These madrasa students are known as Talibs or Taliban. Their teachers are local mullahs like Muhammad Omar. Even today, Afghan children memorize and recite verses from the Quran. But during the desperate time of the Soviet war, many of these Islamic schools were used for a different purpose.
In certain areas, these madrasas were used to train the people and to send out the jihadis into Afghanistan.
Mullahs like Muhammad Omar send the Taliban to fight the Soviets with America's blessing, according to current Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf.
Taliban were the heroes in those days. People from madrasas were given military training, armed and sent across by us, by United States, by everyone.
By the summer of 1986, the war begins to tip back in favor of the Soviet Union, despite the influx of Taliban, Arab volunteer mercenaries, and ever-increasing American arms and money. The Soviets have shifted their strategy to exploit the Afghans' biggest weakness. The Mujahideen have no effective air defense system. Unchallenged, communist gunships pummel the Mujahideen fronts and devastate Afghan refugee camps.
It was a difficult time, wounded and handicaps, orphans, widows.
The Afghans simply aren't equipped to fight the Soviet Air Force.
If we wanted the Russians to be beaten, Mujahideen had to have an air defense capability.
With the help of this top-secret American-made anti-aircraft weapon, the war is about to take a decisive turn. The Stinger is a shoulder-launched missile that uses heat sensors to lock onto low-flying aircraft. Stinger missiles have devastating accuracy, up to 11,000 feet of altitude. On September 26, 1986, the Afghans prepare to use the new weapon for the first time. The Mujahideen say a prayer, aim skyward, and fire. The Soviet aircraft plummets harmlessly toward the earth.
When the Stinger was introduced, it made all the difference. This was a turning point.
After we received the Stinger, we were able to master in big numbers. I will bring Mujahideens from different provinces together, make a very mighty force out of them.
Soviet pilots learned to fear the Stinger so much that they often refused to fly low enough to hit their targets. For the first time since the war began, a Mujahideen victory actually seems possible. Soviet Prime Minister Mikhail Gorbachev faces a painful choice.
What the Stinger did is to force Gorbachev and the Politburo to a decision point. They decided they had bled enough.
3 years later, the world watches the final chapter in one of history's biggest upsets. On February 15, 1989, the Soviet Union completes a full retreat from Afghanistan. After 10 years, billions of dollars in arms and support from the US, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, and 1.5 million Afghan lives, the war is over.
Afghan was very happy to celebrate the withdrawal of the Soviet Union. Men and women was thinking that now we will be having very good Afghanistan.
Foreign volunteers like Osama bin Laden returned to their home countries as Islamic war heroes.
Afghanistan has tremendous resonance throughout the Islamic world as a victory of Islam over the West Islam over the godless Soviets, and it was really a history-making event.
In the United States, longtime CIA officers like Milt Bearden and Michael Scheuer celebrate one of the greatest accomplishments of their professional lives.
It was probably the most successful covert action program in the history of the United States government.
The Soviet Union would never recover from the losses it sustained in Afghanistan. Communism itself would soon collapse in Russia and all over the globe.
The beneficiaries of the Afghan war were actually going to be 300 million people in East Central Europe and ultimately in the old Soviet Union.
In the end, the Afghans' great sacrifices seemed to benefit everyone but Afghans themselves. Many are left poor, homeless, or orphaned. Wounded men like Mullah Muhammad Omar return to their villages, only hoping to live out the rest of their lives in peace. But the violence doesn't end with the Soviet withdrawal. The end of one war in Afghanistan will only be the beginning of another. By 1989, the holy warriors who helped Afghanistan drive out the Soviet Union are embracing new causes. Osama bin Laden returns to his home in Saudi Arabia and uses his stature as a war hero to rally Islamic militants throughout the world. In Afghanistan, Mullah Muhammad Omar resumes his religious studies in a madrasa in Kandahar. Meanwhile, other prominent Afghan war veterans vie for political control of the new Afghanistan. Rival Mujahideen factions were united as long as they were fighting the Soviets. But now, the factions splinter and rush toward the capital of Kabul, each hoping to seize power for themselves.
When we came to Kabul, Mujahideen became involved in fighting among themselves.
The Mujahideen leaders can't agree to form a new government. Each commander wants to govern his own territory autonomously. Eventually, they turn their guns on each other, and Afghanistan erupts into full-fledged civil war. The 1993. As the Civil War continues, America's Afghan embassy remains closed, a powerful symbol of waning U.S. interest.
Afghans became very disappointed when we saw that those friends that they were sending us money, stingers, all those sophisticated weapons, they stopped. Even they stopped humanitarian assistances to Afghans.
Washington lost interest. They simply no longer considered that a big deal.
By 1994, the violence in Kabul has spread through the rest of the country, where no government means no law and order. Organized crime fills the security void, and Afghanistan becomes a leading global exporter of heroin. Opium poppies are easily grown here and easily smuggled out across the lawless Pakistani border. This black market for weapons also flourishes. The most powerful of the Mujahideen commanders use their military networks to control this lucrative guns and drugs business. These former war heroes now stake out turf like glorified street thugs.
Afghanistan was divided into 5 different power centers. The Afghans at that time used to say that you need 5 visas.
Property and land.
With bad situation, and all the people, they were seeking for someone to rise and to fight with these people and to bring security to Afghanistan.
Afghan anger reaches a breaking point when a local Mujahideen commander in Kandahar kidnaps 2 teenage girls. At the commander's military camp, the girls are repeatedly raped. Looking for justice, the villagers of Zinasgar province turn to the local mullah, a one-eyed veteran of the Afghan-Soviet War, Muhammad Omar. Omar has never been a man to run from responsibility. At a young age, he lost his father and had to learn to provide for his peasant family. Omar spent his teenage years wandering from village to village, offering religious instruction in exchange for shelter and food. When the war with the Soviets came, Omar answered the call. His courage in battle was legendary. Now, Omar only wants to quietly return to his Islamic studies. But when the local commander dishonors these two girls and their families, the one-eyed mullah is ready to stand up and fight. Omar enlists the help of 30 Islamic students, the Taliban.
I would tell you why I was joined with the Taliban. We have responsibility to protect the people and to protect the area.
Armed with just 16 rifles, Mullah Omar leads his vigilante group in an attack on the warlord's base.
They commandeered a tank and ran over at least the bottom extremities of this warlord.
After freeing the girls, Omar and his followers hang the commander's dead body from the barrel of the tank.
That is what the beginning of Taliban.
This was the chosen of Mullah Muhammad Omar.
Soon after, Mullah Omar has a vision.
The Holy Prophet Muhammad coming into his dreams and telling him to pick up the gun and fight the Mujahideen, and that he's going to establish his rule all over the country.
In the months ahead, the Taliban will make Omar's dreams a reality. It's the early 1990s, and Afghanistan is a failed state riddled with drugs, rampant crime, and warlordism. But about a one-eyed mullah bringing hope to the people of Kandahar. Muhammad Omar never asked to lead the Taliban movement. He believes he was simply chosen by God. Omar has a series of mystical visions that convince him to stand up and fight the Mujahideen, responsible for Afghanistan's ruinous civil war. Omar's rise from local mullah to national prominence happens almost overnight, according to a rare few who know the Taliban leader.
Nobody could imagine that this unknown fellow, poor fellow, he didn't have even a proper home. How come this person is going to defeat the Mujahideen who were armed with tanks and aircraft?
At the beginning, he had only 2 or 3 followers.
After 10 days, the number of people became thousands and thousands. They were coming and joining with him. The people, the Taliban choosing him because he was a trustful person.
Omar's appeal is not his military or political prowess, but his deep piety.
He believed that he was working at the end of time, that he was entirely in service of God as he understood God, and that his efforts to build a perfect Islamic state were in part an effort to secure his passage to heaven.
Omar is a reclusive figure who seldom ventures outside his home in Kandahar. He has never met with any Western journalist or diplomat. To this day, it's hard to separate Omar, the man, from all the myths and legends that surround him. Those who know him describe Omar as quiet and shy, despite being an imposing physical presence. Because he deeply distrusts modern technology and is against all reproductions of the human form, there are few photographs of Omar in existence.
He refused to be photographed for Islamic reasons. He said, cannot take pictures of human beings or living creatures.
He is a rural religious figure whose beliefs are quite narrow and fundamental.
Even today, many of Omar's fundamental beliefs are still the norm in southern Afghanistan. A rudimentary religious education is all that's available to many children in the area. Omar recruits his growing legion of followers from Islamic schools like this one. Young boys like these Taliban study the teachings of an 18th century desert preacher named Muhammad Abdul Wahab. Wahab believed that all forms of adornment and modernity were blasphemous. He preached that every enemy of Allah should be converted or destroyed. According to one story, when Wahab came across a woman accused of fornication, he ordered her stoned to death. This severe doctrine stands in contrast to many of the rich cultural traditions of previous and current Islamic civilizations. But Wahhabism was strongly promoted by the Saudi religious clergy, and it was Saudi Arabia that donated most of the textbooks and learning materials to the Taliban. A holy war fought in Wahhab's name helped give birth to modern Saudi Arabia. Now, a new jihad will lead to the violent rise of the Taliban. The Taliban movement has simple aims: to restore peace, disarm the population, and implement strict Islamic law. Omar's followers wear long beards, dark eyeliner, and distinctive black turbans to signify their religious commitment. On November 3, 1994, this growing Taliban force moves on Kandahar. After just 2 days of fighting, Mullah Omar's followers capture the second largest city in Afghanistan, and at a cost of only a dozen men.
They rise up at that moment and take over.
They captured Kandahar almost without a fight.
How did Omar's relatively unknown force capture an entire city without a major battle? Rumors circulate that the Pakistani Intelligence Service, or ISI, has bribed the local commander in Kandahar to surrender. After Pakistani Interior Minister Nazirullah Babar calls the Taliban "our boys," suspicion grows that Omar's troops are backed by Pakistan. But two former ISI leaders deny the charges.
The Interior Minister started saying these are my boys and all that, but the reality is, no, not at all.
It's wrong to say that Pakistan created Taliban. Absolutely not. The Taliban is a phenomenon by itself. You can say peculiar to Afghan society.
Other observers say that even if the ISI didn't create the Taliban, Pakistan was instrumental in Omar's rise.
And I don't think Pakistan had a role in trying to raise the Taliban army initially. When Pakistan came to realize that Taliban are a growing force.
Sophisticated Soviet weaponry left behind in the haste of the Red Army's retreat. In Kandahar, the Taliban captured dozens of tanks, stores of weapons, helicopters, and MiG fighter jets. Omar's heavily armed troops now look to conquer more territory. In the next 3 months, the Taliban seize power in 12 of Afghanistan's 31 provinces. The bloodshed is minimal, as Afghans eager for change in their war-torn country welcome the Taliban as liberators.
The Taliban have come as savior of the people. They claimed at the beginning that they will bring peace, stability, and security. They will save the people from those atrocities. So at the beginning, the people supported them. A lot of people gave their weapons, and a lot of the provinces, without fighting, they fall into their hands.
20,000 madrasa students, many of them between 14 and 24 years old, join the Taliban's march through Afghanistan. Wahid Mozdeh was one of the young men who felt the pull of Mullah Omar.
I joined the Taliban. I was one of the people who were very interested in learning about the movement. It was really secretive at that time.
Mysteries continued to surround the Taliban, Mullah Omar, and Pakistan's role in the rise of the movement. But the Taliban's ambitions are right out in the open. After sweeping through the south, Omar's followers set their sights on Kabul. Just outside the capital city, the Taliban overrun the headquarters of Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, one of the two feuding Mujahideen commanders controlling the area. The other, Ahmed Shah Massoud, remains entrenched in Kabul.
Ahmed Shah Massoud's front blocked the Taliban from getting the entire Afghanistan.
Ahmed Shah Massoud will become Mullah Omar's arch-nemesis. Massoud is one of the most legendary fighters in Afghan history. He is the son of a colonel in King Zahir Shah's army. Like most Afghans, Massoud was raised as a devout Muslim, but he also grew up with a rare exposure to Western languages and literature. During the war with the Soviet Union, Massoud commanded a small force protecting his birthplace, the Panjshir Valley. His use of innovative guerrilla tactics helped the Afghans win countless battles against better trained, better armed Soviet troops. Even today, Massoud is still known here by his nickname, the Lion of the Panjshir. But Massoud isn't a hero to all Afghans. When the Soviet war ended, he was one of the Mujahideen leaders who helped plunge the country into civil war. Many Afghans, especially in the south, prefer Mullah Omar and the Taliban. But in 1995, Massoud still has strong support in Kabul, the longtime seat of power in Afghanistan. When he sees that the Taliban are determined to capture the capital city, Massoud decides to strike first. His experienced fighters hit the Taliban with a devastating attack. After taking at least 3,000 casualties, Omar's troops are finally forced to retreat from Kabul. It's the Taliban's first major military defeat.
This was the biggest setback to the Taliban movement.
Stubbornly, Mullah Omar presses on, possessed by the conviction that it is Allah's will he rule Afghanistan. On April 4th, 1996, in Kandahar, Omar appears on a balcony above more than 1,200 religious leaders. He wraps himself in a cloak taken out of its shrine for the first time in 60 years. According to legend, this cloak once belonged to the Prophet Muhammad. The cloak confers upon its wearer a ranking in Islam nearly second to the Prophet himself, Amir ul-Momineen, Commander of the Faithful. With this lofty title, Mullah Omar assumes the right to lead not just all Afghans, but all Muslims. The Taliban movement is just the beginning of larger ambitions. Radicals like Osama bin Laden believe that Islam itself is on the march. First Afghanistan, then the entire world. In spring of 1996, the Taliban lay siege to Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. Mullah Muhammad Omar's followers pummel the city with more than 866 rockets in the month of April alone. But the forces of Ahmed Shah Massoud repeatedly turn the Taliban back. As the civil war continues to devastate the country, Massoud and Afghan President Burhanuddin Rabbani seek help from an old friend of Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden is living in Sudan, Africa. Here, he organizes other Arab veterans of the Afghan-Soviet War into an early version of Al-Qaeda. But in 1996, the Sudanese government tells bin Laden to find a new base for his terrorist jihad.
It was Rabbani and Ahmed Shah Massoud, who's defense minister, who invited him to come back to Afghanistan.
He was someone who had worked with the Mujahideen in the past and was respected. They said he should mediate between them and the Taliban so that the war would be over and they would make a joint government.
On May 18, 1996, bin Laden arrives in the eastern Afghan city of Jalalabad. Just months after bin Laden's arrival, Taliban forces seize Jalalabad, and now Mullah Omar controls bin Laden's new home. Bin Laden and his Taliban hosts are skeptical of each other at first.
When the Taliban came to Jalalabad, he was not good with the Taliban in the beginning. Simply, they gave an asylum to him, and they told him to stay under the Taliban area, and you are a guest, you are a Mujahid, and we are respecting to you to be in Afghanistan. This was the relationship between Taliban and Osama.
Bin Laden had never met Taliban leader Mullah Omar, but by all accounts, bin Laden and Omar quickly developed a personal relationship.
I think there is a mutual respect between the two men, based primarily on their religious beliefs and the fact that they both have fought and been wounded fighting the enemies of the faith.
Former Taliban say bin Laden believes in Mullah Omar's Islamic vision for Afghanistan.
Before he was thinking the Taliban, they are not good people, and after that he confessed that he was not in the right way, and the Taliban, they are the right people, they are religious and they are following the way of Islam.
Osama joined the Taliban.
Exactly how Omar won bin Laden's loyalty is still a mystery. But the future al-Qaeda leader spends $3 million of his own money to bribe the last commanders standing between the Taliban and their ultimate goal, Kabul. The Taliban are now backed with money, arms, and supplies from bin Laden, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. Mullah Omar is about to fulfill his destiny as ruler of a new Islamic emirate of Afghanistan. On September 26, 1996, the Taliban roar into Kabul in pickup trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in their beds. Ahmed Shah Massoud knows he can't repel this overwhelming force. Instead, he decides to retreat with his army and live to fight another day. That night, scores of Taliban troops enter an empty city.
There was a quiet. There was just few cars was on the streets full of Talibans. When the Taliban was camped to Kabul, at that time I was pregnant and I was really optimistic. I was believed that, oh, that's the new life. Finally, we got the peace. But soon, just after a few hours, I got to know that I was wrong.
A special Taliban hit squad mobilizes within hours of entering Kabul. Their target, Najibullah, the communist leader and former Afghan president. The assassins find Najibullah and his brother in an unguarded United Nations compound. The Taliban torture Najibullah and his brother to death. Omar's followers hang the dead bodies from a traffic light. They stick cigarettes between the corpses' fingers and stuff Afghan money into their pockets to indicate the corruption and debauchery for which the Taliban have sentenced them to death. As Afghans awake the next day to discover these corpses, the message is clear. A violent new power has arrived in Afghanistan.
I saw those men, they was against Dr. Najibullah, but they cry for Najibullah. Why this violence was happened to him? What was his ideology? That's a different point. But what Taliban did, that's really bad. Who was Taliban? Who gave them rights to do that?
The Taliban feel they have a divine mandate to govern Afghanistan, according to a very extreme interpretation of Sharia, Muslim religious law. Mullah Omar hopes to return the country to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, an era 1,400 years in the past. Within 24 hours of taking Kabul, Omar's followers imposed the strictest Islamic system in place anywhere in the world. Radio Kabul, renamed Radio Sharia, announces a lengthy list of new Taliban regulations. The new regime bans TV, videos, satellite dishes, music, and all games. The Taliban enforce their laws severely. They punish even petty thieves by amputating their feet and hands.
Do you think that's Islam? Of course, no. Do you think that's human can do that? Of course, no. In our Afghan tradition, they never did that.
A former official says that the Taliban were just following Mullah Omar's orders.
It was the Mullah Omar edict to do this.
Mullah Omar's edicts are enforced by a government ministry called the Department for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. The ministry's religious police patrol the streets in pickup trucks, flying the white flag. These Taliban are notorious for beating people in broad daylight.
Anybody who did not have a beard or the proper size of the beard would be beaten up publicly. I saw it myself. I saw a young doctor who was beaten up in Herat, and I asked him after he was beaten up, he said, until today, I was supporting the Taliban, but from now onwards, I'm going to oppose them.
Many Afghans who once welcomed the Taliban now recoil as their dark vision for the country becomes a reality.
Their ideas were wrong. Their mission was wrong. Their mentality was wrong.
All the time, the bad memories is coming with the name of Talib.
The Taliban's new regulations severely limit Afghan women's rights. Mullah Omar's edict banning girls from school affects more than 70,000 female students. Omar also decrees that Afghan women cannot work outside their homes and must cover themselves in the head-to-toe veil known as the burqa.
Burqa is not in our tradition. It's not our religion. Why shall I wear burqa? Why they punish me? Why they punish millions of Afghans? When the Taliban was came, I got that women means like unhuman.
This video shows the Taliban preparing to kill a woman who allegedly murdered her husband. Death is also the Taliban's penalty for lesser crimes like adultery or teaching girls. Here in Kabul's soccer stadium, the Taliban will publicly execute dozens of women. The future looks bleak for Afghans old enough to remember what Afghanistan was like before the Soviets, the Civil War, and now the Taliban. But in the small northern sliver of Afghanistan, not already under Taliban control, a resistance begins to form around Ahmed Shah Massoud. As the Taliban battle the Northern Alliance for control of Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden calls a press conference at his terrorist training camp in the southern Afghan province of Khost. In this video, bin Laden declares war on the United States, announcing that every Muslim has a sacred obligation to kill Americans. Bin Laden's announcement comes at a time when his Taliban hosts are struggling to earn international recognition. Taliban leader Mullah Muhammad Omar phones a journalist at the press conference to express his surprise and displeasure with bin Laden. Rahimullah Yousafzai is one of the very few reporters who has interviewed both men.
Mullah Omar called me from Kandahar and he asked me, was there some Taliban leader around when Mr. bin Laden was holding his press conference? I said, no, we didn't see any Taliban in that area. He was very angry. Mullah Omar said, either I am the ruler of this country or he is the ruler of this country.
Omar demands that bin Laden publicly profess his loyalty to the Taliban.
The statement said, I support the Taliban regime. I accept Mullah Omar as my leader, as the Amir al-Mumineen, the commander of the faithful, and I will obey all Taliban orders and policies.
Bin Laden's oath of loyalty seems to end the friction with Mullah Omar. But it isn't long before bin Laden causes new trouble for the Taliban. On August 20th, 1998, U.S. Tomahawk missiles slam into bin Laden's terrorist training camp in Khost, the same location that hosted his declaration of war against America. The U.S. strike is in retaliation for the bombing of American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania just weeks before. The U.S. believes bin Laden is behind the attacks. America's retaliatory strike kills at least 21 of bin Laden's jihadists, or holy warriors. But the U.S.'s primary target is not among them. Where was bin Laden? Rahimullah Yousafzai had the opportunity to ask him directly.
I asked him whether he was in the camp, and he said, I was 500 miles away.
Speculation abounds that Hamid Gul, the former head of the Pakistani intelligence service, tipped off bin Laden before the strike.
I retired from the army more than 6.5 years before this happened. So how could I influence all this? If I had known this, then I should have a mole in CIA. Do I have a mole in CIA? Go and ask them. Have they found that mole?
Mullah Omar also has questions about U.S. intelligence. The Taliban leader can't believe that bin Laden could be capable of launching terrorist attacks from Afghanistan.
Taliban were so naive. They didn't know what was happening. When I told Mullah Omar that bin Laden has been accused of sponsoring these attacks on the U.S. embassies, he laughed. He said, how come this man who cannot meet anybody without my permission, who is under my protection in Kandahar, how come he can arrange these attacks?
Outraged over America's allegations, Mullah Omar lashes out at the U.S. president personally. He calls Bill Clinton a liar and a man devoid of decency and honor, a pointed reference to the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Omar vows to protect bin Laden and says America itself is the biggest terrorist in the world. As if to drive home his defiance, Omar orders a new Taliban offensive on the Bamiyan Valley, home to 2 giant Buddha statues that have stood in Afghanistan for nearly 2,000 years. Amidst widespread international condemnation and anti-Taliban rallies all over the world, Omar's troops reduce these archaeological relics to rubble. It is just the latest in a series of moves isolating the Taliban from the international community. After the East African embassy bombings, Washington begins to realize that the Taliban and Osama bin Laden are inextricably linked.
There was a belief that maybe perhaps the Taliban could be separated from bin Laden. I think that view was incorrect, and it was pretty apparent by 1998.
We know, for example, that even their main benefactor, the Saudis, went there and said, you should turn him over. And Mullah Omar said, you know, I only have one question for you. When did the Saudi royal family become the lackeys of the Americans?
Saudi Arabia eventually withdraws financial support for the Taliban, leaving Pakistan as Mullah Omar's only remaining provider. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda uses its Afghan base to mount ever bolder terrorist operations. Bin Laden's followers attacked the USS Cole in October 2000. An Al-Qaeda recruitment tape surfaces a few months later, with bin Laden promising more blood and destruction. Now, on September 9, 2001, the first stage of the most ambitious terrorist attack in history is underway. Just 2 days before September 11, 2001, a terrorist attack along the Afghanistan-Tajikistan border foreshadows the history-making violence to come. 2 Arab journalists traveled to the headquarters of the anti-Taliban resistance for a television interview with Northern Alliance leader Ahmed Shah Massoud. Massoud's friend Fahim Dashti hopes to get some good footage for the documentary he's making about Massoud's life.
When I heard that the 2 Arabs went to interview Commander Massoud, I took my camera and I went with them together.
The Arab journalists carry a letter of recommendation, supposedly from London's Islamic Observation Center. But the letter is a fake. In fact, it was composed on a Kabul computer, frequently used by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, second in command of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. When Massoud asks what the interview will be about, the so-called reporters answer Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and Osama bin Laden. Everyone who'd be happiest to see the Northern Alliance leader dead. Then the interview begins, and the reporters spring their deadly trap.
I was busy with my camera. I heard a voice of explosion.
A bomb hidden in the Arab reporter's camera instantly kills the cameraman and rips through the rest of the room.
My eyes was closed, and I feel that I burned my hands, my face, my legs.
Massoud has also been hit. He and Fahim Dashti are both airlifted to a hospital in Tajikistan. But it's a week later before Dashti hears any news about the Northern Alliance commander.
In that night, my brother came and said, just be beside me, and told me that they're gonna make a museum for Chief. I said, what are you talking about? What is the necessity to make a museum for a live person? Then he did not say anything and he cried. And this cry was saying me everything. And I feel that we lost the real leader for Afghanistan.
Who ordered Massoud's murder? No one really knows for sure. But today, the former Taliban spokesman insists that Mullah Omar and the Taliban had no hand in the assassination.
It was politic, and the Taliban denied that they were involved. And if the Taliban knows about, they will not deny it, because Massoud was enemy of the Taliban and they wanted to kill him.
Taliban members allege that bin Laden and Al-Qaeda acted alone. Killing Massoud was bin Laden's way of repaying Mullah Omar for protecting him, says former Taliban Wahid Mozdeh.
Osama thought he should do something, that if they killed Ahmad Shah Massoud, then the war in Afghanistan would come to an end, and none of the Taliban would be able to say that Osama's presence here was of no benefit to them.
اسامه وجودش در افغانستان هیچ فایده برای ما نداره، فقط برای ما مشکل خلق میکنه.
In his last days, Massoud had traveled through Europe warning world leaders that the partnership of al-Qaeda and the Taliban was a threat not just to Afghanistan, but the entire world. Now, it's too late. Al-Qaeda's deadly attacks on New York and Washington put Osama bin Laden and his Taliban protectors in the crosshairs of a deeply wounded superpower, hungry for reprisal. On September 20th, 2001, U.S. President George Bush issues Mullah Omar an ultimatum.
Tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of al-Qaeda who hide in your land.
Facing an impending American attack, the Taliban hold a high-level meeting to weigh their options. Mullah Zaif attends.
I wanted to convince Mullah Muhammad Omar for some way of solution, because I was confident that Afghanistan will be destroyed and captured by America.
Omar's closest confidants say the Taliban leader is completely unprepared to deal with the crisis.
But Taliban did not know that bin Laden was planning these attacks.
Mullah Muhammad Omar swear that he said, I didn't know about September 11 and who was behind of that.
Omar refuses to take the U.S. allegations against bin Laden seriously until he has a chance to ask him about them himself.
He said, I called to Osama bin Laden and I met with him. I told him, you are involved with that or not?
Osama bin Laden by Mullah Omar.
Osama said that he had not had a hand in the matter. He said the plan had not been made in Afghanistan and that what the U.S. was saying was not true. It was just to put pressure on the Taliban.
Omar and bin Laden's relationship has been complicated from the beginning. They are strong allies, but bin Laden occasionally acts without the Taliban's knowledge or tacit permission. Still, Omar hesitates to turn over the al-Qaeda leader to the United States without clear proof of his crimes.
And Mullah Muhammad Omar said, this is not suitable for us to do, this kind of treatment with our brother. He said, without any evidence and proof, I am not able to extradite Osama. That was his policy, which he was explaining in front of me.
Omar decides to abide by his Pashtun upbringing. Bin Laden is his guest, and when Pashtuns receive a guest, they are bound by honor to protect them with their life.
Mullah Omar said half of Afghanistan was destroyed by the Russians, and if the other half is destroyed by Osama, I'm ready for it.
Omar tells the Taliban to ready for jihad, holy war against America. October 7th, 2001, the United States launches Operation Enduring Freedom, a military campaign to depose the Taliban regime, destroy al-Qaeda, and capture or kill Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden.
What the United States did was capitalize on internal opposition to the extremists of the Taliban by sending small groups of special forces into the country to help organize these opposition groups.
Elite American commandos and unchallenged U.S. air power now support Massoud's army. The Northern Alliance moves swiftly through the countryside, hunting down Taliban and al-Qaeda positions, and summoning death from above. Mazar-e Sharif is the first city to fall. Afterwards, U.S. troops and the Northern Alliance liberate the cities of Herat and Kabul in quick succession. Less than a month later, U.S. forces overtake Kandahar, Mullah Omar's headquarters, and the final Taliban holdout.
They came to my house and they captured me for 1 year and 10 months. I was in the detention of America until I was released from Guantanamo.
American troops take Taliban and al-Qaeda prisoners by the truckload and ship them off to an uncertain future as enemy combatants. But Osama bin Laden manages to escape. Mullah Omar also eludes U.S. forces, despite a $10 million bounty on his head. With Kandahar under siege, the Taliban leader manages a transmission to his followers.
The Mullah Muhammad Omar called that he will be continuing struggle for his life. When he was talking with the Taliban by talkie-walkie radio, he called to them, right now, we should be quiet and we should be again in the ground against the American.
Omar tells the Taliban to put down their guns and go back to their homes until the time is right. He promises to wage an insurgent campaign against the foreigners. Then Omar vanishes into hiding.
People were saying Taliban are history. Taliban are gone.
We fell for what foreign invaders in Afghanistan always fall for. We take the cities, and we took that as a sign of victory. And now Taliban have had 5 years to basically regroup and rearm and retrain.
With the Taliban gone, the Afghan people welcome American troops as liberators. Hope seems to have finally arrived in Afghanistan. Children fly kites, women reveal their faces, and girls attend school. All these things had been banned under the repressive Taliban regime. In 2004, Afghanistan holds triumphant national elections. Hamid Karzai is voted president. Karzai is a popular ethnic Pashtun with strong ties to the revered monarchy. His job is to govern a country demolished by 20 consecutive years of fighting. It will be an uphill climb. Karzai loses the public's confidence every day he can't provide poor, hungry Afghans with basic social services.
Do we have good health services in this country? No. These streets, these ditches, full of filth and sicknesses, can you call this as the real life?
Everybody was thinking we should lead this society towards democracy as soon as possible. But if you don't give somebody a piece of bread, how can he feel democracy is better than dictatorship? When he doesn't see a change in his life, how can he believe Karzai is better than Mullah Omar?
Karzai's popular support quickly fades. Afghans are especially angry about the makeup of his parliament, which includes several notorious figures from Afghanistan's past. There are former communists from the days of the brutal Soviet occupation, notorious Mujahideen warlords from the Civil War era, and even several former Taliban.
Hamid Karzai has said that Taliban are also Afghanistan's children, and they must be brought into the mainstream.
But many Afghans refuse to be ruled by men with blood on their hands. Karzai struggles to extend the reach of his government beyond Kabul. Outside of the capital, Afghans watch many of the country's same old problems resurface. Drug smuggling, gun running, and warlordism. Local commanders empowered by Karzai to help with security are instead linked to serious human rights abuses. A US-led coalition tries to keep the peace, but only manages to slow Afghanistan's descent into chaos. Some Afghans actually argue that they were safer under the Taliban.
The Taliban did bring law and order, and that is a very highly valued commodity in Afghanistan.
For 5 years after the American invasion, the Taliban quietly waited for new orders from Mullah Muhammad Omar. Just before he vanished into hiding, Omar promised to wage an insurgent campaign against the U.S. In 2006, the Taliban make good on his promise.
We thought the Taliban are finished. But now, after 5 years, we are in big trouble.
This is Taliban territory, a dusty tribal belt that straddles Afghanistan and Pakistan. The presidents in Kabul and Islamabad are loath to send their security forces into this dangerous region, so the Taliban operate here as a kind of shadow government. From this base, the Taliban mount an increasingly successful effort to retake control of Afghanistan. Supporters like Maulana Noor Mohammed are eager to gloat about the Taliban's recent gains.
The Taliban are ruling Afghanistan, and they are not hiding.
By 2006, the Taliban are strong enough to seize several southern Afghan provinces. The Afghan government has to call in American air power just to regain control. But the resurgent Taliban movement only continues to grow. Many Afghans feel that Karzai's government has failed them. Foreign troops haven't visibly improved conditions either, they say. Here in Kabul, the very presence of the U.S. and its allies seems to become more unpopular every day.
I don't think you will find Afghans to vote for American being here, even 6%.
A terrible traffic accident exposes the depth of Afghan anti-Americanism. Huge riots break out when an out-of-control U.S. military vehicle crashes in Kabul. 8 people are dead and over 100 injured in the mayhem. Many of the rioters belong to the same ethnic groups that made up the late Ahmed Shah Massoud's Northern Alliance. These are the same people who supported U.S. troops after 9/11. Now they chant death to America.
The people, they were thinking the American, they came of peace, but right now, the mostly people, they are thinking the American and other foreigners, they are invaders to Afghanistan.
We've stopped being any kind of liberators, and now we're just another foreign occupier. And if any place on earth proves the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, Afghanistan is it. And it doesn't only breed contempt, it breeds armed resistance.
It's increasingly dangerous here for coalition patrols. The Taliban borrow many of the same insurgent tactics employed to devastating success in Iraq.
Improvised explosive devices, rocket attacks, and suicide bombings, burning of schools, attacking of police stations. They are utilizing principally terrorist tactics.
As 2006 comes to a close, the new Taliban will prove to be a deadlier, more brutal organization than the one that U.S. forces threw out of power only 5 years before. 5 years after an American-led coalition liberated this war-torn country, the news from Afghanistan just keeps getting worse. A violent new insurgency kills more than 2,500 in 2006. Left for dead in 2001, the Islamic extremists of the Taliban are back. And with a bloody vengeance, one of the new Taliban's powerful supporters is Hamid Gul, former head of Pakistan's intelligence service. Gul was America's ally during the Cold War, but in the war on terror, he's on the Taliban side.
The West is still making a mistake that they think they can destroy Taliban. How can they destroy Taliban? You have to destroy the entire nation.
The Taliban may still be the most organized force in Afghanistan. The movement has deep roots in the south and in parts of Pakistan. Taliban leaders court thousands of new recruits with online videos showcasing successful operations against coalition troops. This recruitment videotape features the new Taliban spokesman, a one-legged guerrilla commander with a reputation for extreme brutality, Mullah Dadullah Akhund. In the wake of a battle with coalition forces, Mullah Dadullah is shown beheading 2 British soldiers, 2 Afghan women, and 27 members of the Afghan National Security Force. Dadullah, tracked for years by the CIA, was the second most wanted Taliban leader behind only Mullah Omar until recently. On May 12, 2007, he was killed in Afghanistan by NATO ISAF forces.
Dadullah is one of the 10 Taliban commanders who were named by Mullah Omar on the Leadership Council. These were the 10 people who were supposed to organize Taliban fighters.
In this same Taliban recruitment video, Mullah Dadullah hands future martyrs small pieces of paper, tickets to paradise. Among the 12,000 fighters Dadullah claims to command, 500 are would-be suicide bombers. Over decades of war, Afghans have been extremely reluctant to resort to suicide tactics.
Well, you see, in the Afghan culture, committing suicide is the biggest sin which God will never forgive, and you go straight to hell.
This Islamic leader supports the Taliban and sanctions the use of suicide attacks.
It is the faith that makes a person kill himself. Who can defend themselves against suicide attacks? Even the B-52 bombers and other American weapons can't defend against them.
The Taliban may be learning the power of terror from their old friend, Osama bin Laden. Some experts believe bin Laden is hiding in the tribal region between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Here, intelligence agents suspect that al-Qaeda supports the Taliban with weapons and tactical training. The Taliban's new terror campaign turns Afghanistan into one of the world's most dangerous war zones. Forces from 37 nations haven't been able to stabilize the country, and Afghans soon might have to handle security for themselves.
There is no way that we could defeat every terrorist who walks on the face of the earth. The coalition goals are to rebuild Afghanistan, both its economy and its military, to the point that it can be self-sustaining. My unit's role is to teach, coach, and mentor the Afghan National Army.
You remember how it was when the Taliban was here. Now that they're gone, it's time to bring Afghanistan together as one country.
And this is called this national army. They cannot fight even for 1 hour against Taliban.
The doomed effort to build new schools is one example illustrating the security problem. Time and time again, insurgents attack newly constructed schools, their teachers, and even students. The Taliban aim to discourage girls from going to school and any Afghan child from getting a secularized education. According to the Afghan government, there are more than 170 school attacks in 2006 alone. The Taliban promise more violence. They often post death threats in public places while Afghan parents sleep. These chilling notes are commonly known as night letters.
Threatening letters that are left on roads where teachers will find them on their way to school, letters posted on school buildings or on the mosque. And they say things like, don't teach girls, don't send your girls to school. If you do, what happens to them will be your responsibility.
The Taliban only support a religious education, like the one provided in these madrasas along the chaotic Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Students from both countries attend this particular school.
This is a high school. There are many children who come to get education.
Will this boy wind up fighting for the Taliban? Many like him may have already joined the movement, experts say.
The madrasas are still there, like factories producing Taliban. So every year, thousands of Taliban are being added to the ones already there.
Extremists are being created because of illiteracy, because of poverty. We need to mainstream the madrasas. Let's get these students of madrasas to come into our colleges and get into any other profession than being a cleric in a mosque.
While some call for President Musharraf to shut down these madrasas completely, others vehemently defend the Islamic schools.
This is just a conspiracy against religious education. Those who want to destroy the Muslim society and the Quran, arrest or kill the mujahideen, and raid their religious schools. Even take this
element based in the Afghanistan-Pakistan tribal region. Powerful Islamic factions like the Jamiat Ulema-Islam Party openly support the Taliban in Afghanistan and advocate for a Talibanized Pakistan.
The Taliban do not want the American influence in their country.
We have supported the Taliban, if not gone personally, to jihad with them.
It's an immense challenge for coalition forces to stop the Taliban and their Pakistani supporters from moving freely over a border teeming with arms, drugs, and organized crime.
To fully understand the complexity of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, you really need to see it.
Right now we are standing right close to the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. I have about 22 kilometers of area to look after. That 22 kilometers is entirely secure. And I can assure you no Taliban is crossing from this side into Afghanistan to fight American forces.
A former Taliban official disagrees.
Everyone knows that the Taliban comes here from Pakistan. Their families are there, and they are equipped and backed from there.
People moving freely back and forth across the border is as easy as crossing the street in the United States.
Afghan President Hamid Karzai blames Pakistan for the scores of Taliban fighters entering his country. Pakistan's government points the finger right back.
Let's fence this border. Let's have minefield along this border so that we are able to check the illegal border crossings. Pakistan has said it many times, but probably this proposal has not been agreed to by Afghanistan.
The Taliban share their ethnic Pashtun heritage with many of their Pakistani neighbors, leading to speculation that the so-called Taliban resurgence is actually a Pashtun independence movement.
Every Afghan that takes a shot at us, we call a Taliban. Maybe he is a Taliban, or maybe we just call every pissed-off Pashtun a Taliban.
Pashtunistan is a movement within the tribes that straddle the border to create a Pashtun tribal homeland. And there has been a resurgence since 2001 of that kind of desire. That is a death blow to Pakistan as a national entity, because all it would leave is a sliver of territory on India's northern border, which would be indefensible.
There is something bigger brewing up, and we must take actions to counter that bigger threat that may come in the future.
Former U.S. spy Relmark Gorecht believes that President Musharraf might be willing to help the Pashtuns retake control in Afghanistan in return for leaving Pakistan in one piece.
You should expect the Pakistanis to continue to be sympathetic, if not give outright support, to Taliban-esque forces in the Pashtun community.
Diverse groups and dangerous new alliances make up the current insurgency against Hamid Karzai's government and the American-led coalition.
Any party fighting against the American, and that's the people they are calling the Taliban.
In the meantime, despite one of the biggest manhunts in history, the one-eyed leader of the original Taliban remains at large.
Mullah Omar was always a very reclusive person. For example, on one of the first leaflets we dropped into Afghanistan saying, if you bring Mullah Omar to us, you'll get this much in reward. Well, we put the wrong picture on it. It wasn't Mullah Omar, it was another functionary of the Taliban.
Mullah Omar's location today is a secret, even to other Taliban leaders.
Authority of Taliban, they don't know about Mullah Muhammad Omar. And when he is ordering something to the Taliban, he is sending video. His command is sound right now, but nobody knows where is he.
Those who've met him can't imagine that Omar would hide anywhere other than southern Afghanistan, the home he's always been reluctant to leave.
Mullah Omar, of course, I can say with certainty that he's in Afghanistan, and he has never been in Pakistan. Why should he be? He's among his people. They're protecting him.
Mullah Omar is very much in that area of Kandahar. He's still there. He's operating from there now.
With its leadership largely intact, its support strong in Pakistan, and an increasingly unpopular foreign occupation, the Taliban movement seems here to stay. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's living standards still rank among the worst in the world. 24 million people depend on foreign aid. Opium farmers prop up the barely existent Afghan economy. The Taliban miraculously eradicated opium poppy cultivation in 2000. But in 2006, Afghanistan accounts for 92% of the world's illegal heroin. Afghan children play amongst the rubble accumulated over 3 decades of fighting. Their average life expectancy is just 43 years.
I couldn't in any way, shape, or form predict how long it's going to take to reach